Good day everyone. Welcome to my channel. I am Nick Jared Loterono from ECE37. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Today we'll witness the clash of processors between Intel Celeron N3050 and AMD E16010. For game 1 of the clash between, we will measure the CPU processing results of the Intel Celeron and AMD 6010. According to CPU-Z, Intel Celeron has a frequency of 2159.11 MHz, while AMD E16010 has a frequency of 1347.27 MHz. In terms of temperature, Intel Celeron N3050 is 59 degrees Celsius or 138 degrees Fahrenheit. Then AMD E16010 is 55.4 degrees Celsius or 132 degrees Fahrenheit. And lastly, based on their type, Intel Celeron N3050 is retail stock frequency equivalent to 1600 MHz, but AMD E16010 is 1350 MHz. And next, based on GameDebate.com, for the performance specification, Intel Celeron N3050 CPU speed is 1.6 GHz, while AMD E16010 is 1.35 GHz. In terms of TDP or power, Intel Celeron used a 6 watt, while AMD E16010 used a 10 watt. And lastly, in memory channel, Intel Celeron N3050 has 2 channels and AMD E16010 has only 1. Therefore, for game 1, Intel Celeron has a slight edge. For game 2, clash of CPU benchmark result. First, by CPU-Z, the single-thread score of Intel Celeron is 75, while AMD E16010 is 68. For multi-thread score, Intel Celeron N3050 having a score of 146 and AMD E16010 is 140. Next, from Geekbench, the CPU benchmark results is for single thread score of Intel Celeron N3050 is 185, while AMD E16010 is 137. And for multi-thread score, Intel Celeron N3050 is 342, while AMD E16010 is 245. And using a pass mark, the average CPU mark of Intel Celeron N3050 is 588, while AMD E16010 is 522. And for the game 2, again, the Intel Celeron topped the clash against AMD E16010 because the higher the score, the better. And for game 3, we'll measure the gaming benchmark. In this game, we'll measure the gaming benchmark by running the same game. The first game is Destiny 2 in no streaming FPS for E16010 has a point of 75.9, while Intel Celeron is 63.9. For 6 Mbps fast streaming, E16010 points is 27.4, then Intel Celeron is 23. And for the streaming impact or FPS loss in terms of percentage, E16010 in Destiny 2 have a 63.9% FPS loss, but Intel Celeron is having 64% FPS loss. Next, for Counter-Strike Global Offense, its no streaming FPS points for E16010 is 67.1. Its streamer side FPS is 22.2 and FPS loss is 66.4%, while Intel Celeron no streaming FPS points is 49.7. For its streamer side FPS is 16.5 and its FPS loss in terms of percentage is 66.8%. And lastly, for Battlefield 5 E16010 no streaming FPS points is 40.9. Its streamer side FPS is 10.9 and FPS loss is 73.3%, while Intel Celeron no streamer FPS points is 30.7, streamer side is 8.2 and having a FPS loss of percentage 73.3%. Therefore, for the game 3, which is gaming benchmark, Intel Celeron still wins even though it is close fight between AMD E16010. And now we will witness the game 4 of the clash between the productivity benchmark of the CPU. First is running Photoshop. For Intel Celeron, for running Photoshop, it has a score of 479.2, while AMD E16010 is having a score of 479.6. Then, for running video encoding, Intel Celeron having a score of 274.67, while AMD E16010 has a score of 338.7, and the productivity percentage of Intel Celeron is 33%, and for E16010 is only 28%. And lastly, from CPU test suit by www.cpubenchmark.net, the Intel Celeron in floating math point is 647 maps per second, while E16010 is 767 maps per second. And for finding prime numbers, Intel Celeron is 3 million prime per second, while E16010 is 2 million prime per second. Therefore, for game 4, still Intel Celeron wins. And lastly, for game 5, the cost and to performance result or review by www.cpubenchmarket.net. For pricing, Intel Celeron cost is 11,222 with 2 GB RAM and 11 inches screen, while E16010 price is 23,464 with 8 GB RAM and 15 inches screen. And for the summary of specification, Intel Celeron clock speed is 1.6 GHz, E16010 is 1.35 GHz. For turbo clock, Intel Celeron is 2.16 GHz, while E16010 has none. For summary, among two processors in terms of computational ability in productivity tasks for running two for running Photoshop, video encoding, finding prime numbers, the Intel Celeron has a slight edge between the two processors. In overall gaming performance, again, Intel Celeron and 3050 with a 45% gaming performance compared to 43.3% of AMD E16010. And lastly, Intel Celeron N3050 is more cost effective than AMD E16010, even though E16010 in terms of price, the price is twice as Intel Celeron N3050, but in terms for performance, Intel Celeron has better performance than AMD E16010. The better part of an AMD E16010, it has only 8 GB RAM compared to 2 GB RAM of Intel Celeron N3050. For me, if I will be given a chance to choose between the two processors, I will choose to buy the processor which is Intel Celeron N3050. Thank you for watching.